Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to My Favorite Mistake. I'm Mark Graven. Our guest today is Kurt Wilkin. He is a co-founder and CEO of the company HireBetter, and he's managing partner of Bee Cave Capital. So prior to founding HireBetter, Kurt founded and led the Controller Group, or TCG, a professional services firm that focused on accounting, technology, and recruiting. It was acquired in 2006. And he's the author of a new book. It's titled, Who's Your Mike? The subtitle is, get this, a no bullshit guide to the people you'll meet on your entrepreneurial journey. So you can learn more hirebetter.com or kurtwilkin.com. It's WILKIN. Look for links in the show notes. So Kurt, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Mark, I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me. I love what you're doing to highlight mistakes and learning from them.
Well, thank you for that. I'm looking forward. It's going to be a no bullshit conversation, right?
I love it. I love it.
Now, Kurt's bio says, I love this. It says, describes him as coach, mentor, entrepreneur, and proud mistake maker. So I think you're in the right place.
Hey, man, you talk about mistakes. I absolutely in the right place. So thanks. I feel like I'm in my second home.
Well, I'm happy you're here and look forward to talking about your book and other things from your career. But as we normally do here, proud mistake maker, what would you say is your favorite mistake?
Man, with the controller group that you just described, I had a partner and he was really the guy that got stuff done, and my execution partner. I was the idea guy, maybe decent sales biz dev guy. We had a great run, as you mentioned earlier, was a successful exit. When I bought HireBetter, I didn't quite appreciate how much Brett brought to the table and how much I needed that execution partner. So my favorite mistake, my biggest mistake, is trying to do this without an operating partner. And boy, I spent 5 years beating my head against the wall until I finally realized what I was missing and went out and found one.
Wow. So I think there's a lot to dig into. I mean, I appreciate you sharing the mistake. Let's talk about, I guess first off, before maybe this ties into how did you come around to realizing the mistake? I know you said it took 5 years. Like what were some of the symptoms? I mean, looking back at it now, what were some of the things that were going wrong or not happening without that execution partner?
Yeah, we were growing rapidly, and I'm very open and honest about this in my book, by the way, but we were growing rapidly at HireBetter, growing 30 or so % per year, which is pretty good for a services firm, but we weren't profitable. And I kept telling myself, oh, we're just scaling, we're, building for the future and, all this crap and I'm not a very good manager of people or just manager of details. And I just kept telling myself the story that we were spending money as investments and really we were just pissing away a lot of money. So that was one. And we see that a lot with our clients. If you are reach some sort of plateau, or if you realize you're just not profitable, or maybe you could be much more profitable, those are generally symptoms. The other was, man, I had a list a mile long of projects I wanted to do. And why don't we do this? And we need to start implementing this. And, I made the team like a 5-year-old soccer team where you're kind of chasing the ball and really no true team. And it was just a bad leadership on my part and maybe bad followership on their part. I'm not sure. Maybe they were good followers because they did what I asked them to.
So tell us, I'd like to hear a little bit more of the context. When you talk about buying the company, was a founder still involved? Or I'm just curious to know some of the dynamics of that transition.
Yeah. Great story. Great question. So with the controller group, I founded it with partnered with Brett Lawson and Kathy Schrock. And then when I left there, I was really looking for what I wanted to do next. And there's a longer story, but the short story is I tried to buy a couple of companies that were more tech focused and not people focused. I was tired of dealing with people. People suck. So I wanted to find something that wasn't focused on people. And I realized at the end of the day, I'm not a tech guy. And I kind of stumbled upon HireBetter, and it was a recruiting firm, and they did things differently. And I think the recruiting industry is broken, but it was a very small firm at the time. There was a founder involved. I was going to buy it and put one of my former employees in charge, and I was just going to be a chairman or, passive investor. And after about 6 or 9 months, I realized that the founder was as great as he was and smart as he was unemployable. And so we parted ways, and I dug in, and 5 years later, I look up and like, wait, I was supposed to be a passive investor.
Yeah. So you not only survived, you said you were growing. As this realization of the mistake or what was lacking really sunk in, like was it a gradual recognition? Was there kind of a big aha moment? And either way, how did you adjust? Did you bring in that kind of person?
Yeah. I probably had a solid operating partner all along, but she didn't push back against me as much as she needed to, which I think your operating partner needs to. So if I disagreed with her, even if I was super friendly about it, she would go along with it. Right. And so we just didn't with Brett, we kind of fought a lot, but we always came up with the right answer, no matter, what the right answer was. And I don't know if it was gradual. I think the first 3 or 4 years, you're like, hey, we're just paying myself nothing, credit card bills going up. And just the story I kept telling myself is we're investing for the future. And then I looked up and realized we're really not building something for scale. We're not building systems and processes and structure. We're just fighting fires. And that's probably the aha, was like, oh crap, my credit card debt is through the roof. I'm not making any money. I'm busting my ass. And as I say in the book, I had built a lifestyle business for everybody but me. And that's a quote from a good friend who came in and dug in and tried to help us understand what our challenges were.
So you mentioned the woman who was working with you here as operating partner. Were you able to work with her so she could adjust? I mean, I don't know if she would come on and say her favorite mistake was not pushing back hard enough on Kurt. Was there a matter of making an adjustment or bringing in somebody different?
We probably, if knowing now, or knowing then what I know now, I think we would have been able to adjust. But at the time, I think neither one of us really understood what was going on. And then later I read Rocket Fuel by Mark Winters and Gino Wickman. If you've read that book, it's a great book about the difference between the visionary and what they call an integrator. If I had read that before, it would have been eye-opening, and maybe we could have made some changes. But she actually had a chance to go back and run her family business, and it was an opportunity of a lifetime. And I certainly wouldn't have wanted to get in the way of that. So it really worked out best for all involved at the end of the day. And it allowed me to go find the right longer term operating partner.
And so then how much longer has that person been in place? Is that playing out the way the way you would have wanted?
Well, it's great that you asked, Mark, because we've talked about favorite mistakes. Let's talk about it a little bit deeper. And I'll share what I can. So long story short, we were wasting money, as I mentioned before. We're inefficient. And then we brought in an operating partner who came in, and she was a great turnaround person. She cut costs. She right-sized the team. We raised prices to be where we needed to be. We cut costs. We were very, very profitable for a couple of years under her guidance. But what I learned was she wasn't a growth partner. She was a turnaround partner. And, so there's a different person for every season. And I learned that she was great for that, but she wasn't great for growth. So we ended up parting ways, and I'm so excited and happy that we worked together because she really saved our bacon. And then I brought in a friend from YPO who came in and did a great job on the growth side, and he had some health challenges, so he decided to step away. And then about 2 years ago, I brought in Cisco Sakasa, who I liked him so much that I made him my CEO about a year and a half ago. And so I've stepped aside from the CEO role, which has been really great for me to go do what I really enjoy doing and love to do, and not run a company. That's not my bag.
Yeah. So, our one of our themes here on, my favorite mistake is, embracing the learning from the mistakes, to not beat someone up for making mistakes, but, to acknowledge them. And, I want to come back to that phrase you use of being a proud mistake maker. I was wondering if you could elaborate on that. Like what that phrase means something to me, but I want to hear what it means to you.
I very much have the belief that we learn best from our own stories, our own experiences, and definitely from our own mistakes if we have the right attitude. And I like to say the bigger the shit show, the bigger the lesson I'm going to learn. So it just allows me to learn. I've tried to make that into a calling card, both for myself and this book. So it's really, this book is a series of stories from other people. Hopefully you can learn from their mistakes and their stories. But I think if we only look at our successes and pat ourselves on the back, we're never going to get better. And I'm a lifelong learner. I want to learn. And a couple of years ago, I think I learned, Mark, that the more I embrace my mistakes, the more authentic I become to myself and to others. And so that's really been my MO, is try to tell people we all make mistakes. So everybody, your listeners aren't sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, Kurt and Mark, they're perfect. Bullshit. We're so flawed. It's ridiculous. And I want everybody to know that they're flawed, and that's okay. And it's not the mistake we make. It's what we learn from it.
And so that's powerful. And I'm curious, within HireBetter or, previous companies that you were involved in, do you think being a proud mistake maker is part of that to set an example for others? Do you want to create a culture, a team of proud mistake makers? Tell us more about that.
Yeah. In my perfect world, we're an entrepreneurial company, and many of your listeners probably are too. And if you don't make mistakes, you're not trying. You're not growing. And if there's anything I could impart on my team and your team, is to try, make a mistake, learn from it, move on. If you don't make mistakes, you're not entrepreneurial enough. You're too safe. And if you don't learn from your mistakes, then we got a bigger, another problem. But I want you to make mistakes. I want you to learn from it. And I want us all to acknowledge, don't hide from your mistakes. If you hide from your mistakes, then you're a coward.
Yeah. So I'm curious, in your role now with Bee Cave Capital, how does that mindset that you have affect decisions on either making an investment, or how you are involved in coaching or mentoring a company you've invested in? Are you looking for companies where, as you put it, there's a bit of a shit show? Is that an investment opportunity to an extent?
I invest in people, and so if the people are humble enough to recognize their mistakes and be a learner, that's one thing. If it is a shit show, which some of them can be, I try to avoid them, because that just means it's sometimes it's too hard. But if a founder is, the type, Mark, they're too proud of themselves, they're the smartest person in the room, they kind of look at poke their nose up at you if you have a Arkansas banner in the background, because I went to Arkansas. I want to be around people who are willing to make mistakes, but that also accept that they do make mistakes.
And I mean, it sounds like there's a matter of degree. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the idea of, there are small mistakes, early mistakes that you can learn from, that you can build upon. But here's what I would propose. I want to hear your reaction. The idea that we're going to learn from mistakes and embracing that doesn't mean we can do any wild, irresponsible, stupid thing and say, well, I'll learn from it. Like, how do you find the balance between, let's say, embracing and celebrating relatively small learning experience mistakes versus looking to avoid something that, let's say, a mistake that tanks a company?
That's a great point. And I'm not sitting here saying everybody just make mistakes all day long. That's not what I'm saying at all. But let me tell you what I tell my boys. I've got 3 boys, and they're all in their late teens, early 20s now. What I tell them is, I want you to make mistakes. I'm here to help you make mistakes, but I'm also here to help you not make the life-altering mistakes. So that's what you're talking about. Getting somebody pregnant, or getting in a car with a drunk driver, things that are going to change your life in a negative way. Those are the mistakes to avoid. Kind of the same thing with your team. If it's a matter of, saying yes to a 10% discount to a client, all day long. If we don't like it, we'll talk to you later. But to, hide something material from a client or from us is a big mistake.
Yeah. Before we talk about the book, and again, our guest is Kurt Wilkin. The book is Who's Your Mike? 2 other things stood out to me, from your bio, Kurt. When you talk about learning from other people's mistakes or learning from mistakes, you talk about seeing your dad struggle as an entrepreneur first off, and then you talk about being part of joining what turned out to be a failed startup in the .com bubble. I'm wondering if one or both of those, I guess, observing your dad and living through that in a way, like how did that influence your view on mistakes or help you as an entrepreneur and investor?
Yeah, I may have interesting stories for both. So let me start with my dad. My dad was probably the smartest person I know, but my dad was very, very cheap, and he wanted to do everything himself. And so the mistake that he made was not have an operating partner like I've talked about, or really being too proud to not proud enough to delegate some of those other tasks to people who are better than him and frankly a lot cheaper than him. And so he struggled. It's hard to be a one-man entrepreneur if you're not delegating anything.
Sure.
And honestly, I don't think I learned that until much later in life. But now that I kind of put two and two together, that's definitely a lesson learned.
Yeah.
On the other, the .com, just the biggest lesson there was it was .com heyday, late 90s, early 2000s. And we were a licensed sports product. We're selling on the internet or e-commerce licensed sports products like koozies and hats and t-shirts, whatever, for football, baseball teams. And we raised $5 million on the back of a napkin. We launched, and we knew we needed to raise money in like late 2000 or something like that. And I was not on the board, but I was like the finance guy, sit around the board meetings, and we needed to raise money. And all the board members were like, "No, we're not going to raise money until we're $100 million valuation." And there was one board member who says, "Guys, if we can raise money now on a $20 million valuation, let's do it, because you never know when this thing's going to dry up." Mm-hmm. And everyone, poop, this is things going on fire. We're going to $100 million. And as you know, the bubble burst and we ran out of money, couldn't raise money. So just a lesson learned that sometimes, never know what tomorrow's going to look like.
Yeah. And it seems like there's, a lesson you brought up earlier, this question of spending money to invest in the future versus trying to become cash flow positive or at least break even. I mean, there's a big, I'm curious how you think through this big decision for a startup or a company that is still growing really quickly. How do you think through this question of really, let's say, swinging for the fences, as some people might put it, versus saying, well, we're stable and we can fund our growth, but we might be growing smaller. It could be a mistake one way or another, right?
Yeah. Honestly, I think that's a choice for the founders and the investors. Mm-hmm. What I mean by that is there are times when I working, 20-hour days for 2 weeks straight where I'm like, well, why don't I just make a lifestyle business and just make this a cash cow and live happily ever after? And I see people doing that. And on the one hand, I'm envious of them. On the other hand, I wonder what they could do if they did the other. And we made the choice to grow as fast as we could and build it and sell it with TCG. HireBetter, we're trying to grow and be a successful company, but it's not necessarily a lifestyle business. It's just we're not trying to grow it to flip it. So it's a choice, I think.
Yeah,
and it's not for everybody.
Yeah, but when there's it seems a dynamic when a founder or founders bring on investors. Now it's not strictly their decision anymore.
Exactly.
Your investors hopefully are aligned with what that decision is going to be, right?
And I'm glad you said that, and I want to make sure that folks know that when you bring on investors, you are treat it more sacred than you would your own money. Mm.
So with the book, with Kurt, you describe it as a business book for people who hate business books. Do you generally hate business books? You mentioned one that you really liked, but.
Well, I wouldn't tell Mark Winters and Gino Wickman this to their face, but I think just the first 3 chapters is phenomenal, the best, right? The rest of it, and that's generally how I feel about a lot of business books. Mm-hmm. I believe, even when I was writing this book, my friend said, "Kurt, you need to write a book about networking and connections and whatever. You're so good at that. I'd read that book." And I'm like, guys, I got 30 pages of that. Mm. And then the rest of a 200-page book, I'm just making full of crap. Yeah. And I think that's what a lot of people do. They've got a nugget, really cool nugget they want to get out there. and then have to fill a bind to sell a book.
Mm-hmm.
And there are good ones out there. Please don't get me wrong.
Sure.
So what I tell people is, 20% nugget, treat mine the same way. 20% nugget. I wrote it in ways that you could really divide each chapter. Say, I want to read a chapter about a legacy employee you outgrew that's in finance or accounting. Well, that's chapter 1.
Yeah.
If you want to read about the big swinging, sales guy you bring in from the outside who's full of puffery and never going to deliver, that's chapter 7. That's Pipeline Paul. So each chapter is a different archetype that you're going to meet on the entrepreneurial journey, and it's just a fun way to learn these stories from other people's successes and failures.
Yeah. So I know that's one thing you focus on is, kind of thinking about the role of certain key employees as a company grows or progresses. Use this phrase where, yesterday's hero might become today's liability. Can you share, kind of what's a common situation there? Somebody who is, how common is it where somebody's a great fit for, let's say, the very early days of a startup? Everyone's got to do a little bit of everything, and as opposed to getting into a mode now where it becomes a little bit more, if you will, professionalized, and certain functions where you maybe want expertise as opposed to being able to be a jack of all trades or a Jill of all trades.
You just nailed it. Everybody who's an entrepreneur has or will have that challenge. And as you're getting off the ground, you need people with that entrepreneurial grit that will roll up their sleeves and do anything. You need to go visit a major customer one day. You need to go sweep the floors the next day. You need to whatever the next day. Those are great guys and gals to have when you start. And not to say that those folks can't grow into your VP of finance or VP of sales or whatever it is down the road. It just doesn't happen that often. And it's as you grow and really go to try to scale, to use that term, you need that specialization in certain areas. And not that you can't do it. I like to tell people, if you've got a 6-person leadership team and you're all going through this for the first time, you're going to learn a bunch of lessons the hard way.
Yeah.
But if 2 or 3 of you have done this before in their, with a similar type company, you're gonna get there faster and more efficiently and with fewer heartaches.
Yeah. And we've had a few guests on the show here frame their favorite mistake as a hiring mistake, or not reacting to their perception of a mistake quickly enough. What's your advice if you've hired somebody, looked great on paper, you thought it was going to be a great fit, and then early on you think you're starting to have second thoughts? Like when do you sort of lean in and try to coach your way through it or fix the situation versus realizing it's a mistake? There's really no real good option other than finding somebody different.
Yeah, I'll say a couple of things. First, there's a book out there called Hire Slow, Fire Fast, which is a great thought. Hire slow, make sure that they're a good fit, both with their experience as well as their skill set and fit into your culture. And then when you realize that it's not, then terminate quickly. The caveat is, did you set them up for success? And if you didn't, then there might be an opportunity to do that. And if you did, obviously move quickly. The other thing is, Mark, look in the mirror. There's an epilogue to the book called When You're the Problem. The last chapter of the book is called When You're the Problem. You could have the best candidate of all time. They're a perfect fit. But if you can't get it out of your own way and get out of their way, you're going to be in this volatile cycle for years. So that's where you need to learn some lessons yourself and acknowledge when you might be the problem.
Yeah. And it might not even be a matter of a pattern. Then you might really say, well, if somebody says, I keep hiring people who don't work out, if there's a pattern, then that maybe points you more in the direction of looking in the mirror and deciding who the problem is. It's probably harder to figure that out if it's a newer business and there's not yet a pattern that's been established. If it's the first time, where it could become a pattern if you don't learn from it and adjust. It seems like that would be a harder situation to diagnose or come to terms with.
Yeah, but even still, we all have stories we tell ourselves about why so-and-so didn't work out. And, we have a story for each one. The thing I wanted to mention, that one of the common ones for your entrepreneurial companies and listeners is in sales. So as an entrepreneur, oftentimes we are the main sales agent, the main rainmaker, and we can sell because it's our baby, and we can overcome objections. We can change prices. We can do whatever we want, right? And we bring in a salesperson, and we just say, "Hey, go sell," without giving them the tools and the case studies and the marketing collateral and the system and the CRM and all that stuff. And they try to sell like we do, and they struggle. And so we get frustrated. So then we try to get a more, get somebody from Dell or some big company, and they come in and they can't sell you what you're doing either, because they're used to selling big company. They can't sell your little crappy startup. So that's the biggest challenge many of our clients have, and many of your listeners probably have.
And that's a situation I've seen, right? So I've worked for 2 startup companies. Both were founded in Austin. And the one company, this is going back to 2000, 2001. It wasn't a quote unquote .com. It was more of an enterprise software startup. So there were different dynamics, but the company churned through a lot of salespeople. And I recognized the one issue of someone who had come from a bigger, really successful company who was seen as more of a quote unquote order taker. And that didn't translate well into a startup. And then, that's a sound. Well, no, I guess that phrase was used in a disparaging way of like, well, and it didn't mean that was a bad person. I think it was more a matter of bad fit.
Right.
And then one of the people, back to the subtitle of Kurt's book here, the people you meet in your entrepreneurial journey. One of those salespeople that didn't work out was of the big swinging bleep variety. People can fill in, they know the phrase. I don't want to have to tag the episode as explicit, maybe. Well, you already said it, but
I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. Yeah, it's not that
bleep them out.
No, it's my mistake getting hung up over that. But this guy was a jerk and was abusive. I was working in like a sales engineer role. I'm not trying to turn this into a counseling session, but like there's this question at what point are there behaviors that are just not acceptable compared to are you delivering or not? And this guy had a Super Bowl ring, and that was his. I don't know if you've run across, if this is one of the people you've met, but I think he banked a lot on that Super Bowl ring was going to impress people. And it didn't always work out that way.
Sure. Not specifically the Super Bowl ring, but everybody, or a lot of these guys and gals, have a proverbial Super Bowl ring they're swinging around with stuff. Yeah. It's interesting. You mentioned what kind of things might they do that make them, maybe you didn't quite say this, but not a good culture fit. Maybe they're successful financially for you, but they're not a good culture fit. That's another question you have to come across. You have to answer for yourself. Are you willing to put up with it? And the good salespeople are going to have an edge, and they might not be the same docile, personality that your office manager has. And that's okay, because you don't want that as your salesperson. So, man, this ain't easy. Let's just put it that way.
There's a lot of room for mistakes, but again, as you're emphasizing, Kurt, and we try to focus here on the podcast, you're going to make those mistakes, but admit them, learn from them, don't repeat them. That seems to be the key.
Love it.
So one other thing I wanted to ask about the book, there, it's kind of a broad statement related to the book where you're saying, the modern workplace is a dumpster fire. So more specifically, like what are the biggest sparks of said dumpster fire in a modern workplace? The fire starts somewhere, somehow.
There's just a lot going on, obviously, with the output of the pandemic and with this great resignation, and now this quiet quitting and work from home, work from the office. If you read Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Work Week, that's a bane of a lot of entrepreneurs' existence. So we're just trying to deal with people. As I said before, people suck. They're also the most beautiful thing in the world, but it's hard to wrangle, and build a good team.
So this phrase, I'll ask you before we wrap up here, quiet quitting, is that a real thing, or is that bullshit? Is that a bullshit phrase?
Well, I don't know who trademarked it. The guys at TikTok do a great job with that, but I think it's been going on for years, and we probably have a lot of it in our organization, and you do too. They're just kind of coasting, is the way I put it. And like I mentioned with Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Work Week, he basically encourages people to work as little as possible, and but have as much fun as possible. And on the one hand, I'm envious. of those guys that, take every Friday off and don't work on the weekends and don't pick up their laptop after 5 p.m. And so who's to blame them? On the other hand, if I'm paying you for a full job, I'd want to get a full job, right? What your full effort during that time period?
And there's that question of how do we define full? Is that a 40-hour work week? Does a startup environment require? Is the quote unquote bare minimum for that what might be considered above and beyond in a different workplace, kind of an older, bigger corporate setting versus not being a co-founder but being an early employee? Are you willing to grind or hustle or all these different words that are used to really make that succeed, or is it just a job?
Yeah, I think you said it. If you're going to be working for an entrepreneurial company, you better have a little bit of that hustle, as you said. And it's not a lifestyle. It's not a when I say lifestyle, it's not a 9 to 5. It's not a 10 to 4 or whatever kind of term you can use.
Yeah.
But it's also tremendously fun and exciting, and you might have an exit, and so there's lots of good things that come with that as well.
Mm-hmm. And then the other phrase you mentioned, the Great Resignation. There's some people saying, well, that's been going on for a long time as well. Do you agree, or is that are there elements of this that are a new dynamic?
I think it's kind of like quiet quitting. It's a great buzzword that gets press clippings. It has the number of people who have resigned and has been increasing over time. So that's not new. What happened was during COVID, there was a big stop. No one moved. Everyone was afraid to move. And so then the next year, it was just exacerbated by so many people that were really looking for something new. So what they are looking for, we do know this, they're, for the most part, generally speaking, they're looking for purpose. They're looking for mission. They're looking for a place that has values that align with them. So that part has been growing and is here to stay, I believe. A paycheck is obviously needed, but it's not the only thing for most people.
Yeah. And back to the subtitle of your book, and the title of the book, again, by Kurt Wilkin, Who's Your Mike? A new, that's my most recent mistake. Not a new bullshit, a no bullshit guide to the people you'll meet on your entrepreneurial journey. And it sounds like you've described some of those people. Some of the people you'll meet share the passion, are willing to put in a lot of work to grow a business. And then some people you meet who are just in a different place, looking for something that is not as demanding time-wise, and as with all things, I'm sure it's a matter of just finding the right fit for the right situation, whether you're that job seeker looking for a change or an entrepreneur looking to hire for your team.
Yep.
So Mike, another mistake. This is a Friday afternoon podcasting adventure. I've long gotten over trying to edit out my mistakes, but the author and our guest is Kurt Wilkin. The book is Who's Your Mike? I'm going to try to say it correctly this time. A no bullshit guide to the people you'll meet on your entrepreneurial journey. And I've had fun saying no bullshit. So Kurt, it's been fun having you here. I really appreciate everything you have to share today.
Hey man, Mark, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate you applauding and the concept of the mistake and helping people learn from it and being okay with that.
Well, thank you for being okay with it, leading by example and sharing your stories. Really appreciate it. Thanks again.
Awesome.